Okay, 7th graders, these are our notes for Chapter 17, Respiration and Excretion. We're going to start. You should have already read Section 1 in your textbook and answered the workbook pages that go along with that. So what I'm going to do is go over the slides with you. You'll also get a copy of these so you can make sure you have your vocabulary correct and your workbook pages correct. At the end of this lecture, what I'll do is just go through your workbook pages and give you the answers so you can kind of mark off what you have on there. So by now, if they haven't been turned in because you had all weekend to get that in, you'll get a 0 because it's just like a homework grade if I was walking around class and checking those. And then, of course, because you'll have the correct answers after you watch this video today. So we're going to start with the respiratory system. I'm going to plug in a little video here that will introduce this the respiratory system functions for you. Remember that the respiratory system is the process of moving oxygen from outside into the body, but it also is the second part to that, which removes carbon dioxide and water from the body back into the air. So let's take a look at this video. Okay, so we're going to talk a minute about breathing versus respiration. Remember in a previous chapter we talked about respiration, which is cellular respiration. That is actually the chemical process, the process in which oxygen and glucose undergo a complex series of chemical changes. And what is the result of that? But carbon dioxide. So that's what respiration is. Breathing is actually the physical movement of air in and out of the lungs. So whereas respiration is the chemical process that provides our bodies with the oxygen that we need, the cells with the oxygen that it needs to give us energy, but breathing is the actual movement of bringing air into the lungs and expelling air out of the lungs. Okay, so let's talk about the pathway of air. Air travels from outside and it comes into our lungs, and in that process it's going to pass through several organs or structures. So it's going to come in through the nose, through the pharynx, and then to the trachea, through the bronchi, into the lungs. And at that point is where the gas exchange, or that absorption of the oxygen and the release of carbon dioxide, occurs once it gets to the lungs. So there's things that go on with the air from the time that it enters your nose to the time that it gets to the lungs. So we're going to talk about that for just a minute. So let's look at this diagram of how air travels through your respiratory system. Okay, so when air comes in from the process of breathing, it enters through the nose, and as it enters through the nose, it goes into your nasal cavities. So your nasal cavities are lined with cilia cells and mucus cells. The cilia cells are those little hair-like structures that kind of work as a swaying motion and remember when we talked about the digestive system and we talked about the in the small intestine how it the villi were there and that increased the surface area but also helped move things through? Well, the cilia in the nose works the same way. It's the little hair-like structures that kind of move and keep things going. But also the process that actually moves it is the mucus that we all know as snot. So we call it snot. The proper name is mucus. So you have mucus cells that are in your nasal cavity. So once air comes in, it's unfiltered air. You're just breathing in whatever is around you. So as it moves through the cilia, it's producing this mucus. Well, what the mucus does is moistens the air and then traps any particles that aren't supposed to be in there. So when you're blowing your nose out, you're just clearing what your body doesn't want to come in your respiratory system. So the cilia keeps sweeping the mucus into the throat, and then it'll eventually move to the back of your throat where it's swallowed. So if you ever had a sore throat and you hear somebody say it's because of sinus drainage, well, that's basically what it is. There's something in that mucus that's irritating, and once you swallow it, it just irritates your throat as well. So that's what happens as air enters your nose. It's going through the cilia, the mucus, and it's being moved all the way up and through the back of your throat. Now, let's talk about a sneeze. So if you have something that's irritating you that's coming into your nose, it's going to cause you, it wants to get out. So that powerful force is of a sneeze. All you're doing is shooting those irritating particles out of your nose back into the air. So that's why you hear a lot now about coughing into your elbow and practicing good hygiene, because when these any kind of bacteria or virus or anything like that comes in and it goes through your air passage, it's trapped in your nose, it's in that mucus, and then when it comes back out, of course, it's spreading. Okay, or if you're sneezing on things around you, then you're just shooting that bacteria or that virus back, and it's sticking on the substance, whatever the surfaces that are around you. So that's why there, when you're sick, you're being asked to like sneeze or cough in your elbow or into a Kleenex, of course, and then of course wash your hands. So after air comes through your nasal cavities and it's mixed with the mucus, it's keeping everything moist, it goes through the pharynx or your throat, okay? So you would swallow that. And then air moves into the trachea or your windpipe. So your trachea, like your nose, is also lined with cilia and mucus to keep everything moist and moving. Now, once air moves from the trachea, it comes into the bronchi, which are the tubes that are going into your lungs. So these passages, the bronchi, direct air into the lungs. So you're going to have it branch off to the right lung and to the left lung. And those bronchi, they will keep branching off into smaller and smaller tubes. And at the end of these tubes, the smallest of tubes are bunches of alveoli, and it looks like a bunch of grapes. Okay, so I'm going back and plugging in these videos, so there may be a little bit of discrepancy from where this video is placed in regards to the slides that I'm trying to show. Evidently, I was talking and not recording. So also, I'll go back and let you know, I said that we were going to plug in a video. I'm having a little problem doing that, but you will be able to watch that video through your slides once you get the slides. But it's at the beginning of the slides for respiration and excretion. So after air enters into the alveolus, oxygen passes through the walls of the alveolus and then through the capillary wall into the blood. Remember, that's why the walls of the capillaries are so thin. So through diffusion, the needed materials can transfer into the cells, and the waste materials can transfer back out, but that transfer can occur. So that's what's happening here. Carbon dioxide and water pass from blood into the alveoli, and this process is known as the gas exchange. So take a look at the diagram that shows that now. Okay, so this whole process has occurred. This is the respiration part of it. Now let's talk more about the breathing. So when you're breathing, when you breathe in and you breathe out, you have what we call a diaphragm. So the diaphragm is a large muscle that is located at the base of your lungs. So when you breathe in, your rib cage expands and your diaphragm contracts. So it pulls down, allowing your lungs to fill with air. When you exhale, your rib cage gets smaller and your diaphragm pushes up, and that pushes the air out of your lungs. So that's what happens when you breathe in and you breathe out. Look at the diagram that shows what happens to the diaphragm and the rib cage when you inhale and when you exhale. The last structure that we're going to talk about in this section is the larynx, or your voice box. So this is located at the top of your trachea, and your vocal cords are two folds of connective tissue that are stretched above that opening. So what happens is when air comes in or air goes out, when it passes over that connective tissue, which are your vocal cords, that vibration is what produces the sound of your voice. So the larynx is your voice box, and those vocal cords sit on top of your voice box, and that vibration that occurs as air passes is the sound of your voice. And here's a diagram for that. Okay, so you will get the slides on this lecture to review. At the end of the slides will be your vocabulary. Your vocabulary, of course, was respiration, cilia, pharynx, trachea, bronchi, lungs, alveoli, diaphragm, larynx, vocal cords. So make sure that you use that slide to make sure you have the correct definitions to study. Now I'm going to go through the workbook pages. So page 225 in your workbook pages. At this point, if you have not turned in your workbook pages to me, you have a 0. So you need to at least go through, if you haven't already done those, to make sure you have the correct answers, and that's what we're going to do now. So on page 225, the first thing you had to do was complete a flowchart with the path of air. So what you have there is the first box is filled in for you. Air enters through the nose, and then to the pharynx, then to the trachea, then to the bronchi, and then to the lungs. So it enters the nose, goes to the pharynx, trachea, bronchi, and to the lungs. Now at the bottom of page 225, number 1, it says circle the letter of each sentence that is true about the air you breathe. You need to circle A, the air you breathe is part of the Earth's atmosphere, the blanket of gases that surround the Earth. And D, most of the air you breathe goes back into the atmosphere when you exhale. On page 226, number 2, at the top of page 226, what are the two functions of the respiratory system? They are, 1, it moves oxygen from the outside environment into the body. And the second function is it removes carbon dioxide and water from the body. Number 3, what is needed for the energy releasing chemical reactions to take place in your cells? And that is, of course, oxygen. Number 4, what is respiration? I'm going to read this slow. Respiration is the process in which oxygen and glucose undergo a series of chemical reactions inside the cell to release energy. I'll repeat that. Respiration is the process in which oxygen and glucose undergo a series of chemical reactions to release this happens inside the cells to release energy. Number 5, what are the 3 products of respiration? They are energy, carbon dioxide, and water. Number 6, is the following sentence true or false? To a scientist, breathing and respiration mean the same thing. That is false. Remember, breathing is the physical act of bringing air in and letting air out. Respiration is the chemical reaction that occurs in the cells. Number 7, circle the letters of the organ systems that make respiration possible. You would circle A, the circulatory system, C, the respiratory system, and D, the digestive system. Number 8, is the following sentence true or false? When you breathe in air, you also breathe in dust, pollen, and microorganisms. That is so very true, and we know that every spring and fall when everybody has all of these symptoms that's caused by pollen. Okay, on page 227 in your workbook, number 9, complete the flow chart to show the path of the air as it travels through the lungs. So this is the same thing, it's just a little more detailed. So the path of air, the first box, the air enters the body through 2 nostrils, or openings in the nose. Those are your 2 nose holes, okay? They're called nostrils. Then air moves through the pharynx, which is also part of the digestive system. Remember, that's your throat, okay? Then air moves into the trachea, which is your windpipe. And finally, air moves through the bronchi, which are the passages that direct air into your lungs. What does a sneeze do? Number 10 on page 227. What does a sneeze do? A sneeze shoots particles and bacteria out of the nose back into the air. That's why it's important that when you do sneeze or cough, you're covering your nose with either a Kleenex or your elbow, of course, because all of that yuck is coming back out. Number 11, another name for pharynx is the throat. And then we're going to match the parts of the nose with their functions. So number 12, nostrils. Nostrils are B, openings in the nose through which air enters. 13, nasal cavities. Those are spaces lined with cilia and mucus. That's inside the nose. 14, mucus. Mucus is A. It moistens the air and traps particles in the air. And finally, number 15 is cilia. That's C, the tiny hair-like extensions that sweep mucus into the throat. Turn your page in your workbook, and you'll be on page 228. Number 16, we're going to circle the letter of each body part that is connected to the pharynx. You will circle B, the nose, and C, the mouth. Number 17, the walls of the trachea are made up of rings of cartilage that strengthen the trachea and keep it open. Remember, you can feel those little ridges on your trachea. So what that is those little round ridges of cartilage that give it its shape. So if we did not have that, what would happen? That trachea would collapse and air wouldn't be able to get in. Number 18, is the following sentence true or false? The cilia and mucus in the trachea sweep upward, moving mucus towards the nose where it is sneezed out. No, that is false. The cilia is moving it down to the back of the throat so it can be swallowed. Number 19, if food enters the trachea, a person can do what? And that is choke. That's what happens when you choke. The air, the passageway for the air is blocked. Number 20, circle the letter of the respiratory organs that air reaches after the bronchi. That would be C, the lungs. The lungs. I'm going to go back on 19. It mentions this in your book, but just so you know, there is the epiglottis is the part in the back of your throat that keeps food from going into the windpipe and enters the digestive system, not the respiratory system. But if it does enter the trachea, the part of the respiratory system, that is what causes choking. Okay, number 21. The following sentence, true or false? Inside the lungs, each bronchus divides into smaller and smaller tubes. That is true. Number 22, what happens in the alveoli? Let's see. Number 22, the blood picks up oxygen from the air inside the alveoli. And I'm going to not ever say that right, so sorry. All right, we're at the bottom of page 228, gas exchange. Number 23, what occurs during the process of gas exchange? So, what happens? Oxygen passes through the walls of the alveoli and through the capillary walls into the blood. Okay? Then carbon dioxide and water pass from the blood into the alveoli. Number 24. Why can the lungs absorb a large amount of oxygen? The alveoli provide a large surface area in a relatively small space. Number 25, we're at the top of page 229, how you breathe. Is the following sentence true or false? The more oxygen you need, the more slowly you breathe. That is false. Number 26, what is the diaphragm? The diaphragm is a large dome-shaped muscle that plays an important role in breathing. Number 27, we're going to complete the cycle diagram to show the process of breathing. So at the top, your rib muscles and diaphragm contract, making the chest cavity do what? Get larger. Okay, so air is coming in. The pressure of the air inside the lungs, I'm going to lose my place here, decreases. Air rushes into the chest and you inhale. The rib muscles and diaphragm relax and the chest cavity becomes smaller. The air is squeezed out of the lungs and you exhale. So I'm going to go through that one more time. I'm going to start at the top. Rib muscles and diaphragm contract, making the chest cavity larger. The pressure of the air inside the lungs decreases. Air rushes into the chest and you inhale. The rib muscles and the diaphragm relax and the chest cavity becomes smaller. The air is squeezed out of the lungs and you exhale. And then the cycle starts all over again. Number 28, what is another name for your voice box? And that is the larynx. What are the vocal cords? Number 29. Vocal cords are folds of connective tissue stretching across the opening of the larynx that produces the voice. And finally, number 30 on the bottom of page 229. How do your vocal cords create your voice? Muscles make the vocal cords contract. Air from the lungs rushes through the opening between them. The movement of the vocal cords makes the air vibrate to create your sound. Now, the next section that we will do will be smoking and your health, and this kind of goes along with something that we're going to be talking about in health. This is going to be more the physical dangers of that and what happens. So we're going to talk more about the social choices of that in health class. So that's your assignment for Tuesday is to read lesson 2 in chapter 17, smoking and your health, and do the vocabulary for that. And all of that's posted in Google, in Facts, and then in Google Classroom. Now in Google Classroom, I'm going to create that document where you can do your vocabulary and just complete it in that document and then turn it back into me in Google Docs. So it makes it a little bit easier. If I have everything in Google Docs, it makes it a little bit easier for me to keep up with everything instead of I'm getting literally over 100 emails a day. And so between 3 different classes and then my kids' teachers and just junk email that I get throughout the day, some of them are getting shuffled. So I want to make sure I'm getting everybody's work and everybody's getting credit for what they're doing. So submit everything through Google Classrooms unless it's your workbook pages. Now your workbook pages you'll need to take a picture of and text it to me or email it to me. That way you don't have to keep printing everything out. You can just do the work in your workbook and then just show me. And most of you have been doing pretty well on that. You had all weekend to catch up on any work that was assigned last week. So by now I've gone in, and if I do not have that, I've placed a 0 in there. So if it's something that you know you've turned in, please shoot me an email or give me a call and say, look, this is how I submitted it, because it really could just be shuffled in with another class through my emails. And I'll take a look at that and get that corrected for you. Right now, that's all I have. We have, it's looking like through the month of April to do this. So we're going to keep doing it more this way with me being able to talk to you and explain things to you more. I'd like to once a week meet as a class through Google Meet. It'll be during our regular class time because I know math classes are doing that now beginning this week. So I will set up a time and send you an invite to do that, but it will be during our normal class time, so it won't interfere with any other classes that you might have during their times. So we'll do that, and like I said, I don't have that scheduled yet. When I do, I will put it in fax and shoot you an email with that time and inviting you to that Google Meet. Other than that, y'all take care. I miss you guys and hope we can get back together soon.